Okay, wonderful. All right. Well, listen, everybody, a big round of applause because he can hear you for Will, even though he can't see you in this metaphorical world we are in. All right, Will, we have
Oh
you in
man.
the most awkward of videos in front of everybody, but I promise you have a wonderfully adoring room here to be. Will and I have
Yeah.
known each other. When did you do your MBA, Will?
I graduated in 2015.
That's a long
20,
time ago.
about a
Wow.
little over a decade. Yeah.
Okay, so I was lucky enough to meet Will when frankly entrepreneurship was emerging in the capacity it is now, but certainly not all the bells and whistles we have today. Will was, and I'll let him share his own story, sort of proactively in the entrepreneurship space before it was quite as defined at CMU, especially in Tepper as it is today, and sort of led the charge kind of walking in out of accelerators and has now ended up in a really great spot to tell us a lot about his current passion that echoes a lot of his professional track before he was at CMU. And so, Will, I didn't intentionally share a lot more than your LinkedIn profile. So if you don't mind maybe kicking us off here with a little bit around kind of what your journey was, kind of what led you to CMU, and then kind of your early entrepreneurship. You shared a wonderful outline with me, which I thought was couldn't have been a better bullseye in terms of the things that you wanted to kind of walk everybody through. Does that sound like a reasonable place to start?
I Oh, are you talking to me?
Yeah.
I thought you were talking to you're looking like off camera from my
Yeah,
perspective,
that's
and I was
right.
like
Yeah, no, it's
waiting for
confusing for
somebody
all of
to
us here. Yeah, we're not. I'm sort of perplexed at why we seem to have these troubles every time in this room, for what it is. But we're gonna have a
I think
blast.
that's
It's
a
your
great
recording.
place to start. That's a great place to start.
Mhm.
Um I taught an MBA class on entrepreneurship through COVID. So I'm used to this sort of virtual set. Oh, look, now I can I can see the ceiling.
Maybe
The
Maybe was like, let's turn around. I was like, oh, everything we touch is broken.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're
don't
there.
bother.
Good. Just keep on going, Will. In your spirit of adjuncting and your MBA through COVID.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. So, let me start here. I wanted to be a computer science nerd. I wanted to code for a living, and I could not get into Carnegie Mellon's CS program as an undergrad, so I got into its business program with the intent of switching over to computer science. Um, However, I actually fell in love with an old a professor there and his teaching, a guy by the name of Pat Cilio in the business school. I don't know. I doubt. I don't think he's still there. Um, but that was back in 0304, when which was the first year of the Short Center. Funny enough, so I did my undergrad when the Short Center was first created, and then I was there on a Navy ROTC scholarship. I started my first startup there in undergrad. I built it, I crashed it, I burned it pretty hard. Um, I ended up in the Navy. So I did a Navy RT scholarship. That's how I got Carnegie Mellon paid for because I wasn't paying for an undergrad at CMU. That wasn't going to happen. So I ended up at Navy RTC, and from Navy RTC, I ended up driving submarines for a living. So even though I was an economics student undergrad, the Navy said, "Hey, you're going to be an engineer anyway." Um, and that was one of my first entry points into more of the hard engineering and hard sciences type stuff. They put me through nuclear engineer school, which was fun. And then I left, came back to do my MBA at Carnegie Mellon. Um, I After the Navy kind of, I think I lived in five homes across four states in 5 years, if I remember correctly. So I wanted to go someplace that felt home and ended up back in Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh feels very homey to me. Um, and got my MBA, started some more startups. I've in total started four startups. Two led to exits, very small exits. I'm no Elon Musk, but two very small exits. One crash and burn, just real hard crash and burn, and then one sort of fade off into the distance over the horizon, um, which was not a bad outcome either, for the time. And that startup was a beer startup. We were selling beer for a living. That was a really fun one. Um, also with it, that was also with a CMU alum, and also it was with Neil Sony. If you, I'm pretty sure Adam knows Neil. He's from one of the
Yeah,
first Alpha
Neil
Lab
now works
classes.
with another professor named Sean Amorati at a place called Growth Signals. Yeah, I've
Oh,
actually known
that's
Neil
right. He
now.
did end up with
Yeah,
Sean.
yeah, I knew Neil when he was at Mom Trusted, and then he was at
Yep.
Stay, and then it's like, yeah, the whole journey.
Yeah, so Neil and I connected while he was in New York, and then we started selling beer for a living, which was really fun. But that's a whole nother story. After startup land for a couple of years, I ended up my son was born. I got married, had a kid. My son was born with a very serious health condition, and I needed to step back from startup life for a little bit and get something a little more stable. However, all I know is how to start companies. Turns out driving nuclear submarines isn't that useful in the day-to-day world. So, um, especially in Pittsburgh, I don't think I was putting driving submarines up the Monongahela. Um, so I ended up, my wife and I moved out here. My son was born. He had a serious health condition. By the way, for the sake of the story, he's fine. He's totally fine. It's a different story for another day. And so I decided to go work at NGIT in Newark. NGIT is a smaller, hopefully I don't have any like NGIT alum in this room, smaller, crummier version of CMU. That's a very good it
We'll
is a
clip that
very good
for
script.
TAs, and we're gonna clip that out of the video for this
Yeah,
one.
yeah. No, no, I love
Yeah.
it. At the time, NGIT was going from being an R2 research institution, it's state owned, a public school, and they were in the process of transitioning to becoming an R1, which puts them in the top tier of research. And so my charge was again, very much tied back to CMU. I got hired because I'd done so many startups in the CMU ecosystem that NGIT looked at CMU and they would use the phrase aspirational peer. Um, and they said, listen, we're a tech school. We're about 4,000, 5,000 kids. We're very engineering heavy. Um, we're right next to this huge public school, Rutgers, that sort of it has volume where we have specialty. And it felt very much like Pitt and CMU. And they basically hired me and said, hey, we want you to build CMU's innovation ecosystem or a microcosm version of it here at NJT in Newark. And so I spent 4 years doing that. And during that time is when I fell in love with deep tech, which is what we're talking about today mostly. So I ran the tech transfer office, the incubator. I taught a couple classes. We spun up a venture fund and a venture studio, which was really, really fun to do. We ran an accelerator with Merck, which was a really fun project. That was around AI for drug discovery, and it's still going. If you're in the healthcare or pharma world and come across the Merck Digital Sciences Studio, that was my baby. Um, but that's when I fell in love with deep tech. So before I get too deep into that, I want to pause. By the way, because I can't see you, I'm going to talk at you unless somebody interrupts me.
Yeah, I promise.
Um,
Well, we're gonna hit a few breaks here along the way. I won't let you go too far if there's a room or a video. I appreciate the grace,
I
though.
I'm a former founder, or I am a founder, I guess. So just talking, so an investor can't ask me an uncomfortable question, that's like right up my alley. Um,
Good, good.
Also, my first year at NGIT, they threw me into the deep end, and I taught an industrial engineering course that was 3 hours twice a week, and I just had to learn to talk at undergrads who didn't want to talk back at me. Um, so let's talk for a second about deep tech versus hard tech, and what does this really mean? And I'll tell you what it means for me. These are one of those words in the tech world you'll find that like seed round or Series A, some people are very specific about what it means. Some people are understand that it's very sort of cloudy. And I'll tell you what deep tech is to me and differentiate it between this and hard tech because they get kind of intermixed. So deep tech to me is stuff that comes from science or engineering or research. This is if your product or your tech is required hours upon days upon years of work in a laboratory in some way, then I would label it deep tech, and I find it very, very interesting. I very much fell in love with it. Hard tech is very similar. Hard tech, because it requires so much energy, hard tech will define it, at least for the sake of our conversation, as the stuff that exists in the physical world. So if I look at the snowpocalypse that we've gotten this past week. By the way, while I'm supposed to be doing my intro into this, the I live outside the New York ecosystem, the New York City. and in the New York ecosystem, and I'm in northern New Jersey, up out near Morristown, if anyone's a New Jersey person. But yeah, so the I lost my train of thought. Hard tech, deep tech. The if I look at the snowpocalypse we had, and I said I'm gonna modify my Roomba, which vacuums my kid's playroom, and put a snowplow in front of it and make it so it shovels the snow outside, that's not deep tech. That's hard tech. The If I have a piece of software that was sitting in and being developed at the Gates building for years and years and years, and we're in the process of commercializing it, that's deep tech, but not hard tech. And this is an important distinction. If you end up in this space and you end up doing this, if I were there in person, what I would do is I'd spend some time asking about you guys so I can orient a little bit how I'm talking to you. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to skip right through that. But if you end up in this space, this is important because you're going to want to build support structures, you're going to want to build community, and you want to build networks with investors, and relationships with investors. And these people like to specialize in certain things. And so I cringe so hard when I'm at like a deep tech event and somebody talks about a very hard tech thing or vice versa, because all they're doing is alienating the people in the room. Um, so yeah, that it's worth pausing for a second, and differentiating there. And my goal for this talk today, and me talking with you guys, uh, guys being the colloquial version of guys, I spent years bouncing around the software world. Of the four startups that I can talk about, that I ran personally, all of them were software startups. All of them, I loved them, and I would not change that experience because that's what led me today. But if you find that you're motivated in this, and this is what really like gets you up in the morning, I want to help you understand how to make those choices so you can jump to the fun part maybe a little bit faster than I did. Um, and not that I disliked that time, but I didn't realize how much fun and happiness and joy I got out of deep tech and hard tech until I got to it. Um, and so hopefully through today and our conversation and understanding some of the differences of it, we can help you save some of that time. So uh, I just want to illustrate one of my favorite startups that I've worked with, in the deep tech world. Um, the When I was at NJIT, there was a professor who was doing research on virtual reality, and how it affects the eyeball. And during his research, he stumbled on uh, this method of exercising the eye muscles by forcefully adjusting the focus in very tiny increments while someone is playing virtual reality and a virtual reality game. And what he discovered that did is it saved the players who had a particular degenerative eye disease. It's called convergence insufficiency. It kept them from that degenerative eye disease, leading them to go blind. So there's this population of people who, because of their genetics, are very likely to go blind. And if you play this and if you use his tech, they proved that it saved 90% of these people who used his tech from going blind. And that's where science enters the real world to make something better or interesting or compelling or fixes a problem or solves an opportunity, whatever language you want to put to it. That's what I always found compelling, and that's what I found really interesting, and that's why I kind of dug into it. um this is a good moment to pause before I get like into deeper stuff and talking about it a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's
Any
an excellent inflection point, Will. I'd say because the next thing I'm gonna hopefully Will is gonna tell us a little bit about is his very kind of ocean focus and sort of how that plays into the kind of deep tech versus hard tech versus both kind of moment. Is anyone here working on hard tech? They want to kind of react to anything Will said. Maybe you have a question about clarifying, or you're welcome to kind of walk him through his own history, right? And ask about, why he felt that, the words disaster or debacle or whatever you used, Will, were the right like adjectives to apply to one of his startups versus the other ones. And or maybe
Mm.
you're curious about how you can have a small acquisition versus a big acquisition. What do we think? Or otherwise, Chenyan's going to do the thing he loves to do, which is point at people and be like, "Come on up."
Or I'll just keep talking at you. I have no problem doing
Oh
that
no,
too.
we're gonna make these functioning introverts come and work, but we're not gonna choose the same five people that talk voluntarily in the beginning. So Chenyan, tell us who is your chosen?
Oh, someone over there.
Yeah, I'd like that energy. Now we're not even individual people here, Chenyan. We're just like into zones. Okay, Chenyan, send them up here. We're gonna put a couple people up here to come of you. We're gonna make them sit in front of you, well, though, so you can get anything other than my ugly mug in
It's
front of
great.
you for sure. I feel like you've already done me enough favors. I don't need to return this one in the way. Okay, please come and introduce yourself to Will.
Hey, how's
I
it going,
I got
Will?
an I got an A in your class, Adam, so I feel like I still owe you. So we're good.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
I
Go
spent
ahead. Sorry.
I'm a Army War College fellow here at Carnegie Mellon, but looking as a startup opportunity post Army career and things like that. So getting into it, you said business background, moving into some of that tech. How do you make the transition where you're not necessarily the subject matter expert of some of the things that you're trying to take to market and things like that, and learn it yourself, or bring the smart people on to do that and get that know-how?
Yeah, yeah, I can respond to that, and I'm going to do it in a way that assuming I know what you're talking about. And there's a particular poignancy if you're making the military to civilian jump. And because the military, for those of you in the room who aren't military humans or veterans or whatever, it's a very different transition. Um, the One of the things that I learned about myself from my days in the Navy was very much that my superpower is learning things very, very quickly. And we used to, at nuke school, we called it drinking from the fire hose. I assume you have a similar phrase at some
Yeah,
point in your
it's
career.
similar.
Um, and I, that became an asset. So when I'm working with a faculty member, a researcher, a scientist, my hunger for learning about what they've spent their life dedicated to has become such an incredible skill set. Um, and going into it very open, I'm a generalist. I'm a business human. I'm not truly an engineer. I have enough verbiage from my Navy days to understand a little bit of mechanical and electrical, but I'm not an engineer. And so going to these people and saying, you're building this crazy wild thing. I was working with a professor out of Lehigh who was building an underwater wireless charging station, and it's the the little wire. It's basically the thing on your phone, but for underwater robots. And generally, I can see why that's important. But as a generalist, and Adam can talk to this, by the way, almost better than well, definitely better than I can. Those relationship building can be the most valuable asset you have on that career path. And so being interested and curious while you're learning about something, that's how you crack that nut. At least in my opinion. And I think you have to be honest with yourself about your personal skills, your personal assets, your personal interests, and say, is that how I approach this? If deep tech and hard tech are interesting for you. Does that answer
Yeah,
your question?
absolutely. Yes, it did. Yeah.
Yeah, really wonderful question though. I mean, I really appreciate you hunting out. Curiosity, Will, is like an underrated skill and superpower. Please come and say hello. You're welcome to take
Oh,
a seat too if you're more
hello.
comfortable. I don't mean to make everybody sit.
Well,
Hi.
my name is Sean. Yeah, I'm
Hi, Sean.
a MS a master student of AI engineering in CMU here. So
Cool.
my question is that I admire that you have a very rich life experience, like from military to CMU in economics, and then go to engineer and startup from deep tech to the beer things, a lot of things. So my question is that I'm kind of similar, have a broad interest. but and I learned biology for 7 years. And then after graduate, I became a sales, and after that, I became a programmer. So my question is that there was not seems a clear through line in my life. So from time to time, I will ask myself that, oh, what am I doing? Why am I doing such things? I don't know whether you have such like a moment to question your like truly or very deep motivation. If there is
Yeah.
consistent motivation of your life, and how you deal with the broader curiosity of the life.
Excellent.
Yeah. Great question. And this is about to become a therapy session for Sean. Um, I say this, I say that tongue in cheek because brutal honesty, I see a therapist myself and I talk to her about this. I talk to her about how hard it is to transition and reinvent yourself every couple of years, every career, everything changes. Like it's not an easy thing. It's not. It's and not everybody can do it. Not everybody should do it. I love this life. I love every couple of years, and I'm going to get into more of the ocean tech in a little bit, but I love going into it and diving deep. And this kind of speaks to the previous guy whose name I have already forgotten. Sorry, dude. The like that curiosity is really interesting. I'll say this, it is incredibly helpful to have the support of a good spouse. If anyone has a partner, and again, we're going to talk about this a little bit more about the importance of community. My community is my wife. Everybody's community is a little different. Um, Before I met my wife, the guys I used to run cross country with were my community. In fact, one of those guys is the guy who went on to do Shoe Fitter. If Adam has told about Shoe Fitter story,
Not
the
yet, but acquisition via Amazon for proactively not returning your shoes.
yeah, uh, Shoe Fitter said he got Brett got into Shoe Fitter because when we ran cross country in undergrad together, he was pissed at all the shoes not fitting. The and that's Breck was my co-founder in my first company. But it's I listen, man, I have nothing but empathy. And I don't know if I can answer that question for you because it feels very personal. The I've struggled with it. I've struggled with it a ton. And like I said, I see a therapist. And for many reasons, but that's one of them is the transition after I left the university, I ended up with New Lab in Brooklyn developing an offshore wind innovation center that was a $55 million project that ended up getting killed by an executive order from our current president about a year ago. And then I had to redefine myself again. Taking that personal moment. I mean, I remember when I was back in grad school and back in Pittsburgh. Um, in fact, Kit was really good about this. Kit, who if Adam hasn't brought him in, might eventually. I don't know if you guys are still close. Adam and Kit used to be very close. The He was always good about talking about how difficult emotionally and mentally the founder's journey can be, and transitioning and changing your career is wildly difficult. Again,
So
I
real
come
quick,
back to that.
sorry,
Sorry,
well,
go
I was
ahead.
gonna no. I just want to make sure. So first up, yeah, Kit is my current co-founder at my current startup, so nothing's changed there for context. But I want to kind of make two takeaways because I think this is a really important question. And so I heard two things. One is that being serious about this, a coach or a therapist is a uniquely helpful tool because the intensity of entrepreneurship feels like it's going to bubble in different ways. The second thing I heard you say is that you don't have to have your co-founders don't need to be your community, right? There could be community as defined by an affinity group, a relationship, and the like. Is that two good takeaways to at least
Yeah.
kind of kick us off?
Yeah, great. Yes,
Perfect.
100%. I love that.
All right,
That's
come on
way
up.
more succinct than my blabbing.
No. Come on, please. We just want to make sure that a couple of these wonderful, struggling extroverts are going to come and say hi to you. Please introduce yourself. Sorry.
I'm Shanshan, a CS PhD, and I wanted to share a very interesting trend that my research recently focused. You find that recently the users every day we open Google but we don't search we don't test our questions in the search bar. We just search ChatGPT and then ask ChatGPT everything's right. So I wanted to say the development of large language model have changed the way that how users access information, and you'll find that more and more autonomous agents appear in the web, and the web becomes a type of a new paradise like agentic web. So you will find that it changed not just the user size, but also how the content provider manage their data, right? You'll find that if we use ChatGPT, the ChatGPT just call the API to find more data source, and the content provider need to manage their their data source and their web page, and try to retrieve the most relevant web page and return it to the agent. So you will find that the web developed into a multi-agent corporation. So my question is, what opportunities you see in this new paradigm, both the user side of the content provider side?
So I don't know if our audio can be a little dodgy. Will, do you want me to restate the punchline?
No, I actually
Perfect.
do think I got it.
Wonderful.
And I appreciate that. And unfortunately, I'm going to sidestep your question and not answer it, which is to say that it's it's worth having that discussion, in my opinion. I'm not the guy to have that discussion with. The specialty and the world that I live in and what I do for a living, what kills me about the modern sort of movements in the tech ecosystem is that you get a lot of people who talk as if they're experts without pausing for a moment and assessing whether they really are authorities to talk about this thing. And for what you're talking about, I'm not your guy. When for grad school we had Alexis Ohanian come through. Alexis Ohanian is the guy who created Reddit. He was doing his book tour, and we organized a little lecture for him at the University Center, which I think they've renamed something. And he gave his talk. It was the end of his book tour, and then after the he gave his talk, we went out and had a beer with him, which was pretty cool. Like Alexis Ohanian's like internet royalty, and I mean he's married to Serena Williams. What I love about that story is that he's more famous for being married to Serena Williams now than he is for being the founder of Reddit. Which, let's talk about feminism for a second. That's awesome. The um, but over a beer out in Shadyside, I remember him and I chatting about the future of the internet and the future of tech. And he said, I will remember this for the rest of my life. This is 10, 11 years ago. He's like, watch, we're going to talk natural language at computers and it's going to kill Google search. And I remember at the time being like, we're not killing Google search anytime soon. That's crazy. And and to his credit, he man, did he call it. Like he described it perfectly. He was a couple beers in though at the time. So we'll take it with a grain of salt. And it kind of speaks to my brain is not wired to imagine that future state. My brain is wired to think about how, and again, we're going to get more into this. How do we get green electrons out into the world? It's just where I live. So I'm
I
going to
actually think, Will,
sidestep your question, not answer it.
No. I don't think so. First off, that's a wonderful question. We can talk about it anytime. It's like literally what I do research on. But I
Yeah,
want everybody to know what Will said here, because this is actually a reflex that's very poorly executed at CMU, especially in early years. Like it's okay to not know something, and it's definitely okay to contextualize what you do know in this moment. And I don't want to speak for Bebe and Chenya, but I can tell you, if I could predict what was happening next week or which models were coming out or what they were going to do, we'd all be in a very different universe than we are now. So thank you very much for a wonderful prompt. Let's bring it up here
I
and
would
grab
be
our last two.
No, but
if I could
thing
predict the
so
future. If I could predict the future, I'd be sitting somewhere drinking out of a coconut with a little umbrella, not sitting in New
That's
Jersey
right.
with
And
the
Will,
cold.
Chenyan, my colleague Chenyan,
Yeah.
Will, Chenyan.
Sorry,
To
please go ahead.
disclaimer otherwise.
yeah. But
Sorry.
sometimes on the research tech side, we are having a different problem in a way that we can predict the technical feature, but we're not making money out of it. I can share a story where when DeepSeek V3 came out, I read the paper, I say, oh shoot, the llama is falling behind. They are getting huge trouble. I forgot to short Meta. I also half year ago with all the different trend I also see, oh, Gemini is running away. I also forgot to put in a lot of money in Google. So I was not able to transfer the technology trend that I was pretty good at predicting, for example, the V4, DeepSeek, whatever it's going to be, into market decisions, which is kind of the other way around, kind of a unique problem for maybe some of the CMU folks. Yeah. So just share some backstory here. Yeah.
The that's actually a really great segue if Adam doesn't mind me jumping back in.
No, please. Yeah.
The and again, unfortunately you were standing a little further back, so I did have a little trouble hearing you. The I at some point you're going to interact with investors if you're going to keep a career intact. There's no way around it. Venture capitalists love spending their time. I cut angel checks because I love it. The the thing about venture capital that drives me nuts is that they, like a lot of them, say that they can predict the future. And I don't have a ton of faith in that. And what I would tell you is in that moment, you can go sit with a business nerd who will talk to you about free market information theory and you making those choices because in theory the whole market knows them at the same time. So if you could have made that choice, the price would have already reflected it. And so I actually don't have a good like roundup for that, except for to say, yeah, that sucks.
Well,
I wish.
here's the funny quote that investors always say. Like, the joke is they're like, "Oh, this is the future," and I was like, "It's definitely one of them."
Yeah, that's great.
So yeah, please come in. Let's ask. Now let's get right to the question though, because we do got a power through
Yeah,
here. Make sure
go.
Will gets to the actual deep tech.
Hi, Will. My name is Hazem Bukhari. I'm a MLT student at the Language Technology Institution here at CMU. And
Cool.
sorry to open some old wounds for you, but I'm really interested in the startup that
Crashed and
crashed
burned.
and burned. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I believe we learned the most from our failures. So I want to know what you learned, and if you had the chance to redo what you did in the past, how would you approach it again? And would you actually do it, or you just look at it and say this idea is not w- worth it in
Well,
the first place?
Wonderful
Yeah.
question.
yeah, great question. I can tell you that story. And okay, no, this is an even better segue back. So if you'd like to sit down so I don't know, do you need to take a break, Adam? Like actually
No,
break
no, we're good.
break?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, we're okay. No worries.
So I had started a company in 2005, 2006 called Mave. Uh we did it with a bunch of my cross country buddies at the time at CMU. We were like 10th in the nation for our division, by the way, which is another word. Hell yeah. Um, the we were out there, and in those days, the buzzword in those days was Web 2.0. Facebook had just come out. In fact, I was one of those in that group of CMU nerds who got a Facebook invite. In that we were like school number 5 or 6, when Facebook first got started, and so we looked at Facebook, we looked at what was coming out, and basically somebody said, "Listen, this is why isn't there a Facebook-like thing for small businesses? Why don't restaurants and plumbers and electricians and whatnot have a online review site where people can poke their reviews?" And what we had theorized or had sort of imagined at the time would be a sort of a mix of Angie's List and Yelp is basically what it was, before we knew what those two were. And the so we ran a viral marketing campaign through Pittsburgh streets. I We woke up at god awful hours and with chalk spray paint spray because by the way, I was 19. All 19-year-olds are idiots.
Fair enough.
It I I'm 40. As I look back at my life, I think every couple years I turn around and go, man, I was an idiot last year. Like that's what getting old is. So 19, we took chalk and in the course of about a month, we went from 0 users to about, if I remember correctly, and I could be getting this wrong, about 50 to 60,000 users. About 5 to 10 or so were actually active on the site. And what ended up happening is um, we looked at who was using it, and it turned out everybody was looking for a babysitter or they were a college student offering babysitting services. And if I could do it again, I would go back and say, listen to your customer. They're telling you what they want because I would be babysitting.com right now and be sitting somewhere with my coconut and umbrella and fancy whatever. And instead, what we did was, oh, this isn't what we built. They don't know what we want. Let's change all of our features to try and discourage these people from using our site so that we can get back to what we wanted to build, which was for small businesses. And over the course of a weekend, we lost about 80 to 90% of our user base when we made those changes. That company, by the way, was working on a old compact desktop stack in our basement in Squirrel Hill. That's what our server was, which is hilarious. But we basically, our users, our customers were telling us this is what the need is. This is who you got a hold of. This is the problem we're solving. We're paying for it. They were paying for it. And we decided we were too smart for our customers. And that's how we crashed and burned the company.
We're gonna put a pin in that one because I think this is like a fun. But like we just had an image. Well, do you remember the image where it's like a part of a car goes to a full car and it's like meant to represent waterfall,
Yeah.
and below it it's like a skateboard,
Yeah.
and like we literally
Yeah.
just showed that earlier today in the context of like, hey, at some point people are gonna just tell you they wanted a bike and not a car, and this is your
Yeah.
moment. So excellent question. Thank you for asking. With two more, Will, and we're gonna let you wrap it up here with
Right.
your extension into deep tech. So please.
Hi, Will, this is
Hi.
Thank you for the lovely talk. I have a question related in deep tech, or where you're trying to create a company where you need to have your own physical product, or instead of an app or a service. So, like for background, I wanted to create a low-cost water filter when I was 17, and I actually ended up creating one in my garage. But my problem was when I was talking to people and like how I want to scale it, there was no when you're trying to create a prototype of a physical product, you need more prototypes and need to show it more. And since it was like a back of the garage kind of a situation, I never really had an ecosystem where I could create more of it. So, what would be an ideal situation where you can create multiple of these? And yeah, when does someone have, or like, what sort of a platform does someone need to have to do this kind of an R&D, which is not like a company, like a huge company funding you for it?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. There's so many ways to skin that cat. And let me just say that none of them are right and all of them are right. This is another thing that in the tech world we don't give enough credence to is luck. Luck begets luck, and sometimes you just have to get lucky. Um, Prototypes in hard tech, in my opinion, come down to two different types: works like and looks like. So in the early days is you're going to build something that works really well, but is ugly as sin.
Hmm.
And to get people excited about it, whether it's a 3D model on a computer, you were going to design what you want it to look like eventually. And so in hard tech, one of the things that we have difficulty with is that the sort of lean, agile framework that gets taught, that we learn, doesn't quite apply. The concept is such that the original vision of it, which can date back to Ben Franklin, by the way, fun historical fact. The first mention of agile, lean startup comes back to Ben Franklin in Poor Richard Almanac. At least the earliest I can find. The It's designed so that you build a prototype in software, you test it with a customer, you learn about it, then you tweak your prototype. And sometimes with the software world, you can throw it all away. You're like, oh, what I should have done with my previous example is learn from my customer, thrown out everything and built babysitters.com, which I did not do. Well, in hard tech and physical tech, that's not always an option because you built a thing. And that's representing sometimes years of work, millions of dollars of capital, especially if we're talking deep tech and research. And you can't just like pivot your product. You can, however, pivot your customer. And so when I work with faculty and researchers, and when I'm doing it myself, I that's usually what I prescribe is pivoting your customer. What ends up happening when you do that, and you get into customer discovery right, and I'll say this: you built a prototype, great. The moment you have that, you get deep into customer discovery and the customer discovery cycle, because there's lots of ways to fund that continued prototype development. The best is with a customer. Deep tech and hard tech are sort of notorious for pulling on what we would call a strategic investor earlier than most software companies will. Where you're getting an investor who really understands, because this is the world and industry they live in. Usually, the sort of off the shelf advice is to avoid strategic investors until a little later, your Series B or Series C. And in hard tech, we pull that earlier. So, is there a right answer to what you're talking about? There's a million right answers. Let's go find an Alpha Lab gear. Let's go uh, New Lab in Brooklyn, Plug and Play. Um, there's a million accelerators and early stage investors that will invest in you, but none of them will do it if you don't have some market validation. I can't tell you how many water filters I've seen in my life. It's a lot. It's a lot. And you have to prove to me, I'm an angel investor. I invest in startup companies. Brutal honesty, I won't invest in yours, but it's just not for me. The but finding somebody who knows and loves and understands what you're doing and validating to them that this isn't just a science project in your garage, there's something real here. That's usually how you get investors on to start funding the next prototype.
Okay, well
But
let's kind of explore that looks like works like dimension. I think that was like
yeah,
a good trade-off, and I think that lines up. We have our last question here, and then we're gonna get back. Thank you, thank you. Last question here, and then
I
we're
could
gonna
talk I
go.
could talk for 4 hours to this group. This is fantastic.
Well, yeah.
Hi, my name is
Go
Nirma
ahead.
Greco. I come from a computer cybersecurity engineering background, and throughout the years, I feel like I've talked to my partner about different ideas or services I would like to create or be part of, but then we never get the time or we don't know like the right connections on where to start, like a startup or maybe how the development process of products. So my question is if you have any advice on where to start or I don't know, like a
Step one.
pad. Sorry?
Step one.
Yeah, like a
Okay.
step one. Yeah.
Oh man, this is gonna be so similar to the last question, which is there is no right answer and there's all the right answers, which is and again, I'm gonna throw into this other thing that we don't talk about much, which is luck. Luck matters more than we like to think it does. We look at people who are very lucky and we attribute their luck to hard work or genius, and sometimes it's just luck in the right place at the right time. And so getting the right starting pathway for whatever it is you're building or doing or creating, there is no one right answer. And that's such an awful cop out, and I'm so sorry. And I'll after I talk a little bit more about what I do and where my expertise is, what I would offer is if anyone's building in my area, come have a one-on-one. I'm happy to do a virtual cup of coffee. There's never a cmu.edu email address that I don't respond to very quickly and intimately. The um not intimately, but with that's not the word I meant. I meant with thought and purpose. The find somebody who's in that world and get to talk to them. The and they might give you pathways that I, as a who doesn't know the security world at all, the digital security world at all, it's just not my world. They might have pathways that I wouldn't have. And um, so find somebody who knows what they're talking about and talk to them because they might say, "Oh, you get in with this community, this accelerator, this invest, everything's a little different, everybody's a little different." I don't know the right way. Except I'll say this, just wait, Adam, is this getting published somewhere?
Maybe bits and pieces of it.
Okay, just fucking start. Just there's nothing
Thank you.
there's nothing beyond just fucking starting. There's
Thank
just
you.
do it.
Yeah, I'll
And
make a
and
t-shirt out of that one, Will, for sure. In
yeah,
case, instead of the swoosh, the just do it, it'll just be like a face of
just
you going.
just
But actually,
fucking do it.
I want to make sure that you heard the part that Will said, which is one, like people are afraid to go talk to real people that they don't know and ask them if they love their idea slash baby. And I think that is as simple as that sound. Oftentimes we like look people that we trust, like a partner or somebody, we're like, hey, do you think this is a good idea? They're like, yeah, that's a great idea, right? And the second piece is like, you can just do things. I know that's become a bit of a meme, but the reality of it is, looks like, works like, software is certainly no excuse. We talked about, Will, just before we hopped on with you, we showed everybody how to use the free make element of Figma to like instantaneously generate like clickable prototypes. And, like 3 minutes
Yeah,
in, we're like
it's
what used to
fantastic.
take you and I 10 years ago, like, 3.5, 4 weeks. So I love the kind of shape all these conversations. We will definitely extract all the good Q&A and we'll cut up some of these blots. I did want to kind of turn it back to you though, Will, around the work you're specifically doing around the ocean. First off, I thought it was brilliant the way you framed some of the realities of just working in the ocean about deep tech and hard tech and the combination thereof. So do you mind if we kind of shift back for the next 10 or so minutes on kind of the work you're doing and how you kind of explain deep tech and hard tech in the lens of sort of the aqua ocean world you live?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Perfect.
So, yeah, yeah. So let me do this. Um the let me start with a very sort of chronological version of how I got there. So, after I left the university, I paused and had what one of our lovely gentlemen extroverts asked, which is I decided that it was time to shift gears. I was done being a tech transfer officer. I was done teaching for a little bit, and I kind of took a couple of weeks and looked inward and said, "Hey, what do I want to do?" And I looked at my experience in the Navy and said, this is something I really miss. I miss being on the water. I miss the ocean. And then I looked at my experience with startups and innovation and deep tech, and I said, how do I put those two together? And the hypothesis that came out of it was, I'm in a unique place to build out a ocean tech venture fund. These are places where I have unique asset access. Um, and there's lots of downsides to that, and venture people can talk to them more. But I started to build in that space. Um, the and it's partly because in hard tech and deep tech, we tend to be a very tribal community. We very community focused. And I can speak to this ocean on the ocean side for a little bit. Um, and by the way, I'm not building a venture fund anymore. That's part of the story. The You have to understand a couple things to work well in blue tech. The first is the ocean is trying to ruin everything. Every material, every paint, every metal, everything, the ocean's trying to ruin it. It's just a function of what the ocean is and the briny salt water, etc. The second is everything in the ocean needs to be bigger. We don't work with wheels. If you're building something in the physical space, you don't need wheels, you need a keel. Um, and then the third thing is that the ocean is always trying to kill you. We get trained very early on if in the ocean, if you're a mariner or a sailor, that if somebody's in trouble, you help them. Um, because the ocean is trying to kill you. It will tire you out. You will drown. You'll get crushed by waves. You'll get thrown on rocks. The ocean is an incredibly dangerous place to work. And because of that, it has created this culture, specifically in this corner of the hard tech world, where we help each other in a very unique way. I think if you went into Midtown Manhattan to Startup Alley and talk to a bunch of the fintech or marketing tech people, you'll find that they're much more dog eat dog than we are. And it's in part because what this is feels intrinsically more difficult. I gave you the ocean tech example, but almost every hard tech physical product world has some element of either I screw it up and I electrocute somebody, or I'm working on materials and I make a noxious gas. There's an element of danger, which I think has created this culture of community in the hard tech world and the deep tech world that doesn't exist elsewhere. Um, the Even that VR company I talked about before, those guys can bump into walls if they're not careful. It's really dangerous. Um, the hold on a second. I've lost track of Adam's original question. I was
Well,
getting
just saying,
somewhere.
well, I think we're just framing towards like the idea of ocean tech, and specifically, you've already done the hard part, which is to say, environmentally, there's barriers which make it equally rewarding as it is challenging, right? So if you survive the ocean and it does not kill you, and you build something that doesn't fall apart, right? Then there's lots of opportunity. But I also thought it was important how you weave together the fact that you lived underneath the ocean for a long time and you aligned to things that really made sense. So I didn't know if you were kind of bringing us towards like why you decided to build and sort of why you decided to stop building.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay. I had put together about so when I left the university, I ended up teaming up with some other folks, particularly at New Lab in Brooklyn, and we at the end of the day, we ended up raising $55 million for an ocean tech innovation center in the New York, New Jersey area. Um, the the downside to it is that it took about 10-ish million dollars from the offshore wind developers. And so when President Trump came into office via executive order on day one, he pretty much put a huge roadblock in the offshore wind development in the US. And in the course of about 3 weeks, I had 45 of the 55 million soft circled dissolve on me, and which is, by the way, a solid punch in the shins. That's rough. It was a rough couple of weeks then for me. And I had to force myself to sit down and think about the things that I get excited about. That is, by the way, that's a luxury you have as you get older or have support structures around you. Because sometimes I had a deep tech founder when I was at NJT who was from the Central Ward in Newark. He actually won the Edison Award for Agriculture. He designed a deployment system to launch seedlings out of drones to reforest areas that had been hit by wildfire. And we went to this award show, black tie thing, and there's Nobel laureates up there. There's folks from Bell Labs. The governor of New Jersey was up there. And this kid from the Central Ward goes up there and gets his award. And afterwards, he comes to me and says, "Hey, listen, man, I think I'm going to be homeless next week." And we had to pause everything and get him a job and a career. So when I say pausing and thinking about what I get motivated by and what I get excited by, that is a luxury. And that's worth acknowledging. If you're in a place where you can do that, be thankful for it. So when I paused and I said, listen, I'm going to look at um, where I have experience, where I get motivated, and where I think I can have an outsized impact in the world in which I live. And as I did that, I talk to people. You just talk to people. You find interesting people and you talk to them. I ended up having a cup of coffee with Brian Halligan, who was the founder of HubSpot, who started $100 million ocean tech venture capital firm. I ended up teaching at his Ocean MBA program after that. But talking to this guy that is deploying millions of dollars into the ocean tech space let me understand where interesting needs were, where interesting problems were, and where I can connect personally with it. Um, so I don't know if that really answers your question, Adam, but
Well, it'd be good to know where, so we are kind of rounding on the class time, but I would say it'd be good to know kind of where you're pointing next. And then I do want to leave at least a minute for you to do a proper commercial about kind
oh
of how
yeah,
I'm, your newsletter and whatnot, but maybe give us the kind of
yeah,
punchline about, so that journey has kind of led you now to what is at least approaching
yeah.
a season or a chapter.
Yeah, yeah. So the next project I'm working on, I've spent the past like 6 or 7 months developing and talking to people and doing customer discovery and doing all of that stuff first. And I've since built a relationship with a professor out of Princeton. We're building a company that preliminary we're calling Kelp Materials Labs. Uh, so if anyone has seen any of the news articles about critical minerals or rare earth elements and the political landscape around them, the US has a huge demand and a huge need for it for future electrification, for defense, for consumer electronics. It turns out that the biggest volume of these materials exist in the ocean. However, they're really hard and really expensive to get out of the ocean because it's dilute. These solid materials are all over the place. And so I took a lesson from an old CMU guy, Louis Van Ahn, who looked at two problems. So if you go back and look at how Duolingo started or how reCAPTCHA started, he looked at two problems, and he used to give lectures on this. I don't know if he still does. And he would say, listen, these two problems, we can solve them with each other. And I had done a project for Miami-Dade County for an innovation challenge because they're having sargassum, which is this huge macroalgae rolling onto their beaches, causing this huge sulfuric smell that is killing their tourism industry. And they don't know what to do with it. And so I said, we need critical minerals. They exist in the ocean and they're being accumulated in algae. And we have this problem with algae blooms. Can we put these together and develop a startup that solves two problems and creates value in the world two different ways? And that's Kelp Materials Labs, which I'm still working on. I know I'm out of time, so I'll give my quick shameless plug.
Please.
I do a couple of things. So first off, there's nothing to see about Kelp Labs materials yet. There's nothing. We're barely starting. I'm at the very earliest stages. It's actually really fun. I love this part. Um, but to build reputation, to build my community, I did a couple of things over the past couple of years as I pivoted into ocean tech. One is I run a summit in New York called the New York City Ocean Tech Summit. We're in our third year. It's doing fantastically. We get sponsored by JP Morgan and a couple of law firms and Woods Hole Oceanographic. It's really great. So if you're in the New York area in June, come look me up. Come shoot me a LinkedIn note. And then the other thing I did to build my reputation was I built a newsletter called bluex, which summarizes and looks at venture activity in the blue tech community. So if you're interested in blue tech at all, go to bluex.beehive.com or bluex.news and sign up for my newsletter and we'll be in touch. And if anyone is building anywhere near hard tech or deep tech in the climate or ocean space, look me up on LinkedIn and we'll grab a virtual cup of coffee and chat.
Wonderful. Big round of applause for Will for joining us today.
Only
Will,
2 minutes late. Not bad.
Yeah, lots of people coming in. Really appreciate you. We're going to let you roll in all the logistics of today, but hopefully I will see you soon. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, sir.
Take care. You guys be well.
All right, thanks. We'll see you.